Alright, what up, y'all? So, as a heads up, this is a re-recording of a video I actually released earlier today, but I was unhappy with the recording because of the fact that I actually forgot some things at the end, and I'm trying to cram them in now while also trying to keep the video shorter. On top of the fact that I was pretty unhappy about the audio after I went back and listened to it once I was doing timestamps, just because of the fact that for some reason my mic didn't gate itself enough where you could hear me breathing heavy, like I breathe like the heaviest person in the world. So we'll see if this changes anything, but I will drop this just straight up regardless, and I'll just leave it out there. I don't care. So this is going to be a 3-part video series for all of C Kohaku's combo theory, fully encompassed. This intro video will literally be gravity, which is the main thing I'm talking about. I need people to understand gravity. The BNB breakdown for those who are new. If you've never seen the BNB and never had someone break it down for you to understand how to parse learning it, I will do that for you. Then I will talk about nitty-gritty stuff of things that you need to know about Kohaku's physical demands and execution, and more of like things that will cause drops. Like I could say one now, like if you even microcharge a Bato while you're doing 5cc, this shit will drop. That's one major thing. So if you ever question why, for some reason, the combo reset, that is probably why. I'm trying to think of mentally where to go from here because I kind of spaced out for a second. But the big thing overarching for all of these videos, it's going to be a 3-part video series, if I didn't say that already, is I do not think C Kohaku's execution is hard in the slightest. I think it's greatly over exaggerated because my execution is mid. I'm not going to act like I don't have better execution than some. I'm also not going to act like I have worse execution than some. I feel like I'm completely in the middle, regardless of how many characters that you've seen me play on this channel, if you've been a long-time viewer of the channel, and slash, or those who have actually played me in Melty and have seen my routing. I think I am actually down the line. But the thing is, her executional demands of the player versus the reality of what her execution demands are two different things. And it's a very thin line to see that that's never talked about. And I'm going to talk about it as the main topic, which is gravity. Because really, her executional demands of the player, you're doing double quarter circles. You're doing 236A into 236BC. So you can do A Bato into feint. The rest of her theory, the more you know it, the easier it is. Because really, just like every other character, it's a whole bunch of timings, right? It's not anything abnormal. You get to see them happen and understand what you did wrong. Right? Let's say I'm doing feint loops, right? So I do a very unique feint loop. I'm too early, okay? So Abato didn't hit. I didn't buffer properly, so I got 2A. I over buffered with my 2A and 2C, where I basically did the 3AC plank that Ryogi has to do to get side switches, so I skipped my 2A and went straight to 2C. These are things that the more you practice, you can see them. It is not that hard. I don't think she's doing anything out of the realm of spec from other characters. I can say that with assurance. I do not think she's doing anything out of the realm of spec. Besides the underlining thing, gravity. So this is unique because of the fact that normally when you hear gravity scaling, you're used to hit count based gravity scaling. So the higher the hit count, the faster they fall, the lower they float, and slash or the faster they tech out of combos. It's a weird combination of all three, and it's really situation dependent, but it exists. In Kohaku's case, it plays a very important part for weird characters like the one on screen, Hisui, where a certain link that's a stabilizer in your combos doesn't naturally work in certain cases. So, mid-screen, fine and dandy getting that 2C because of the fact that you're hitting with the end of 2C's hitbox, which is the fatter part of the hitbox. Once we're talking mid-screen corner, though, doesn't work. There might be an altered timing for it to work. I think there actually is. But if you're naturally doing it, which is the way you can do it naturally on other characters, it does not work. So with that being the case, you wonder, well, do I need a high hit count? I need to hit like a plant first to get this to work? No, that's not the case. What you need to do is understand that C, Kohaku, and H, but I'm talking about C through this, you can manually scale it on your own, and that's where people get thrown off, and a lot of things are not talked about. That is a big problem. So the question is, how do you scale it? A-Batos S236A is your main and most egregious scaler of gravity. It scales it the highest. It is very slightly above the next thing I'm about to show, but it is above enough where it does drastically change combos a lot. Where later down the line, in basically the next video and the last video, which I basically called the abyss of Kohaku knowledge when it comes to combo theory, you will not be using it in your first string. And the first string for Kohaku is the gravity determining string. It's very important for me to mention that. The first string determines the rest of your combo. So what you do in the first string does determine the rest of your combo with Kohaku. Next is 2C, where specifically once it enters knockdown state and they trip and fall, that scales gravity. But because of the fact that it is delayed and it's not an immediate thing, it's not hard to do this delay, whatever. But I do recommend adding a delay normal in there for reasons that I will state later. Like for most cases, if you're using 2C in your first string, you're probably not using 5C. So with that being the case, I recommend adding delay 5C just as a stabilizer to get that catch more consistent, and it also adds a little bit extra damage. Speaking of 5C though, 5cc also scales gravity. You do not need to do it in full, you can still do it in parts and it will scale gravity. But it is very goofy, and I will talk about that once I get to talking about the two problem characters, which are both Hisui and Ryogi. So, let's remind the class. That should hit on the 7th hit. That's really not that many hits in a combo in Melty, once there's some characters that do like 30 normally. So I have to scoot forward, and I still drop. That's the 8th hit. That's 1 hit of difference. That's 2 hits of difference. It's literally not that far off. And that's considering the fact that if I did it like this, it still drops, and that also would have been an 8th hit. That's where gravity comes into play, and it's very important to understand that with Kohaku because of the fact that, like I said, it changes your timings. It changes the way you have to do links. And the easiest way to show that is to give you a preview to the Abyss, which is table looping. This is going to be a very long section in the last video because of the fact that there's a lot to talk about in regards to it, because of the fact that it is basically the holy grail combo extension. It does so much. But let me show you what adding table loop normally is to a combo once you have all the gravity in the world, and then show you how gravity easily affects it and affects the timings. So I'm going to go back and do it one more time, and then stop and not do the rest of the combo and just do the link. The big thing here is noticing how much time I have to do this link. I have like all the time in the world to do this link. I have a smart water right next to me where if it was uncapped and next to me, I could literally take a drink of it and put it back down in the middle of that combo and probably still get it to work. That's how much time I feel I have, because of the fact that quite literally it's a sweet spot basically based off the apex. I will talk way more on it again once I get to the 3rd video. but it is timing based, and how much time you have and how fast you need to do it varies based off gravity, and easily it changes by, let's go from 5C to 5cc. It still works, but that is significantly faster. Like, it is so much faster in comparison to me just doing this. And I have basically all the time in the world. And again, that's since it's still manageable to do compared to once you double scale gravity, which is also a thing. My bad. My 5A is not coming out until after she techs now. That is how much, like, the gravity gets scaled there. And it's very important to understand that. And that's why it's like, knowing what you do in your first string matters that much for Kohaku, because of the fact that it does basically determine the whole rest of the combo. Because I'll talk about it more in the second video and going forward, but having more gravity means you get to do more, while having less means you have to do things faster. You have to be able to understand that difference, and it plays a huge part in Kohaku's combo theory, especially once you're getting to advanced stuff, because you just always want more, and you're trying to get the max out of everything. So, with that being said, let's get into a BNB breakdown, because we gotta talk about some timings. So, switching to the universal practice dummy, because it's easier to showcase everything on this character, because of the fact that everything works, you're not worried about it. And for those who aren't me that uses Akiha as your practice dummy, it's going to show you your baseline damage on normal health characters. So, I consider the BNB the primary one you need to learn, mid-screen to corner. There is a true mid-screen, which I also will do, but mid-screen to corner is very important to understand, and I'm going to start in the corner, which is the latter half of the BNB. So, to talk it out real quick, the problem with this latter half of the BNB is the weird-ass timings. There are so many weird timings that you have to deal with, on top of the fact that there is a link in there based off of gravity. So that's what throws a lot of people off on learning C Kohaku, because the fact that she says she's hard, and then you realize there's just a whole bunch of weird shit you got to deal with. So the latter half of the BNB is after the Air Dash JBJC link. You do 2C, 5C with an optional delay depending on gravity. Charge 5B, which this is a very important thing to notice. This knocks down into 4B, 2B, or 2B, 4B in combination. For the BNB, we do 2B and 4B in combination. Into basically repeating the loop with 2A as your link pickup, 5C, charge 5B again, 4B, 2C, or 2B, 2C. Both can be your knockdown, but 2B, 2C is stable, 4B, 2C is, I'd like to say, more consistent, and that's because of gravity. The big thing with this is feeling out these timings, because of the fact that the timings are weird. Because again, you're going knockdown tool, a delay that's optional. In the case of doing this on a standing character, it's not optional, you have to do it. Into a charge normal that knocks down. So therefore, on hit reaction to it, you have to immediately go into your next set of normals. Then you have to still do a double quarter circle, plus the plink attached to it so you can feint. Then the 2A link and repeat. This is abnormal to do on a standing character, let me just say that as FYI, because I have to add even more delays than normal, like I'm adding a delay on the Abato to get this to even work. And I pressed the wrong button, let's go. That is the latter half, and it's very annoying to do on standing, plus my execution will be like whatever out the wazoo for this video, whatever. So the thing is understanding these weird timings because there's too many timing shifts. Like it's one thing that you don't have to do the delay, which my version of the BNB or the one that I consider the main version of the BNB doesn't have any delays. But the big thing is that once you do need to do a delay, because I feel you need to understand all the timings to a degree to truly understand her basic combo theory. The big problem does come with the fact that how gravity affects the fall timing on getting hit by a Bato. Like this part, if I can get to it again, is very crucial. Because once you're building up the tolerance for it like this, which is why I'm starting in the corner so you can fill out this weird rhythm. It's weird once you're going from normal, normal, charge, normal, back into instant reaction to more normals, then double quarter circle into a link. It's one thing when you're in here, where you're standing, you have all the timing in the world. It feels awkward as hell, and it's the most unique possible way you can do this timing. So, with it being the most unique possible way you can do this timing, once you work your way back, it gets easier to do because at that point you're just building up speed. You're not building up the tolerance of the weirdness of the execution like you just did, which is what doing it in standing creates. But you're building up the speed where at that point you're just doing it straight through with no delays, so it ends up working easier for you because you build up ability to do this and deal with this weird timing. But this link is very important to understand because it's the thing affected by gravity. Because if you look at it the way it happens here, she tables out slow, then falls slow. You have time. You have way too much time than you'd normally have in combo, just to say that now. There are certain cases where you might have that much time, but it's very rare. Once, if I'm going to go to mid screen and do basically the BNB, which is 2A, 2B, 5CC, 236A, 236B, well, I'm going to do this version without the 236A in it because, again, it scales gravity and I want you to know both versions of how it looks. That's where it starts to get goofier because of the fact that gravity scaled, so then you have to really look at it and understand your timings. So, tables out faster, falls faster. It's pretty drastic of a difference compared to standing. So, that's one thing to really keep in mind is that it's pretty quick, but you still have leniency here with it. Like, I have to add a delay, which you saw that drop there. I didn't do a delay 5C, so that dropped there. But that still works, and that is not how I consider the BNB. Again, the BNB I consider actually has a Bato in it because a Bato acts like the stabilizer in here, and it's a stabilizer that adds damage, but also it makes it so you do the combo straight through, as I repeat this statement, because the fact that now that you're doing the combo straight through, it's just you have to be able to do the execution, which technically, in my opinion, is easier because you're not dealing with weird delays. That's the BNB. And it's very important that I go back real quick and actually show you that fall timing too, because you have less time than when you do it with just B Bato. So she tables out slightly slower in this case, but she immediately falls. It does depend on your hit count, to say the least, because if you hit 5cc properly, she's going to fall extremely fast. I was slightly off, if I recall, because I think the BNB, if you do it perfect, goes up to 5695. I did 5674, which I think is pretty standard. Like, that's where it gets really nuanced, is the fact that gravity comes into play, changing your link speed, plus the all random timings you have to deal with, or adding delays because of the fact that you didn't scale gravity enough. All of that comes into play, and that's what affects the BNB, because the fact that you have to sit there and now think, well, I didn't use a Bato, so now what do I do, right? Because I didn't use a Bato. So, alright, you're doing it, add a delay, the rest still works, but you have to add a delay somewhere in there to create that consistency. So with that, that is you knowing the BNB now. That is knowing mid-screen the corners BNB, and that's the harder one. Because true mid-screen makes it so much easier because guess what? It just turns into a feint loop instead of a Bato loop. I should actually call out these combos as I'm doing them to understand the parts, but I'll probably talk more about the parts once we get to the next video. Because now mid-screen, you're doing less weird timings because you just got to do a feint loop. That's it. You got to do, basically, to go corner to corner, you have to do one feint loop. You just have to do that once. The rest of the combo is the same, besides the ending bit where you have to do one feint loop and then something I'm going to talk about now, which is the 236B charged wall splat and the pickups after it, because these are something that need their own time to be mentioned because they're pretty goofy. So let me go to training display. I'm going to put on input display for this. So I'm going to whiff real quick. The big thing about this is this roll, which this roll is weird. You can do this on whiff, right? But I'm also rolling delayed once I'm kind of mashing the button. Like, I'm not mashing it ultra hard, but I am mashing it enough where I'm not rolling when I should be rolling, which is also the issue. So if I do this on hit real quick, that works. I have a whole bunch of gravity. But the thing is, once you do it as the buffer that the game allows, like that, she rolls delayed. Because there is a buffer on this, which is why it works. Like, on all of the Batos, there's a buffer on it, where the buffer carries over. But the thing is, once you use the buffer on this, for some reason she rolls delayed, and that works once you have high gravity, but if you have low gravity, it's probably going to screw you because of the fact that you roll delayed, which means they'll hit the ground faster than you, so they'll probably tech and hit you in the face. Well, if you do it like you treat Charge 5B, where you do it on hit reaction, then all of a sudden she rolls like the fastest character in the world. I don't get why that's the case. Specifically, I actually don't. But that is a thing. And that roll speed does matter because of the fact that, let's say, gravity is high. Well, you need the faster roll so you still can convert. Or, let's say you're in the case where you're doing something unique in the corner and you want a certain setup. I barely caught that with 2A. Like, barely caught that with 2A. And being able to do that 2A 2C catch is very important. So, now let's get into the catches. So, the thing about this is, the main takeaway I want to say is that 2A 2C catch, but there are 3 catches. Technically 4, and I'll talk about the 4th catch in the next video, but there's 3 catches. There's 2A 2C, there's 4B 2C, and just raw 2C. For the BNB's case, you can use either raw 2C or 2A 2C. I highly recommend practicing 2A 2C. The reason being is because of the fact that this works in a lot more cases than just raw 2C, and it's also your quickest pickup because of the fact that if you're doing same side, this now works. And as shown earlier, it also works once you do the side switch even with the delayed roll. You want to still avoid the delayed roll as much as possible, but it does work. And I think understanding all of those catches is important because of the fact that they do change things for the character once it comes to your Okizeme, etc. So it's goofy. And I'm not able to do 4B2C just because of the fact that gravity's too high. I'd have to change the way I'm doing that to sit there and get it to work there, and it also gets goofier because of timings. But knowing all 3 catches is important because they all do something different, and it's very important to notice that. But 2A 2C I recommend because of the fact that it is the fastest, it's also the hardest. Because of the fact that you can't catch too high because you'll prop them up too high for 2C to connect. But just with learning feint loop, right? Just this one loop. And that, you now know the BNB. That is the true mid-screen BNB. That's all it is. That is so much easier than doing the mid-screen to corner BNB that it should take no time once you backtrack to it. Just because of the fact that you are literally doing less. Like, it's still a case where I recommend learning both. Hey, that's that drop I talked about where I held for a microsecond and I all of a sudden reset the combo. That's a thing. But quite literally, like, you still need to know the timings for both, right? Like, and not drop like I'm dropping. And know all the catches. You need all of it. But once you start here and you can do this weird thing, doing everything else feels so much easier, like drastically easier. So it's not even worth discussion of starting, hey, let's start with the true mid screen, which you can just start at the corner and start with the hard part, work back and build enough good habits to understand how it works, and then combine it, and then you're fine. So let's now switch back to a problem character, and I'm start Ryogi, then switch back to Hisui, because BNB Breakdown is done. You should understand the BNB. It's just practice at this point. So the thing about Ryogi is the fact that you basically, in order for 2C to work, need to max scale gravity. You have to be perfect. Like, if I am doing the BNB, I quite literally mean if I do not max scale it, the 2C will still not work. And that's not considering the way she falls is also weird, too. So that's with me properly scaling it. But let's see what happens if I cut out like one hit of 5cc. She's now too high. Like, it really matters for her when you're doing it basic BNB combo. It's still achievable, but it does really matter. So the reason why I have to talk about her is because of the fact that her and Hisui both fall into the case where I do alternative routes. Once you get to the next section, or not the next section, but the abyss, you're gonna learn that I really actually appreciate these characters because of the fact that they just give me damage for free, basically. But at the beginner case where you are just learning Kohaku and the BNB is your staple, she's weird because of the fact that you have to hit things perfect, which you probably will not do in match at the beginning. You get used to them and then you will, but at the beginning you probably won't. So how do you change that? Well, I actually start cutting stuff out to make the combo simpler. Um, that's what I do. Like, so for my version of doing the BNB on Ryogi specifically, I actually cut out a Bato and I end earlier. I just straight up end earlier. There's just no point in extending it really, because all way more important than anything else is getting your knockdown. That is way more important than anything else. It is crazy I'm saying it because of the fact that to me it's basic, but it is that much more important. So I actually cut out a Bato and I kind of just end earlier. Like, you can end right there with 2A, 2C if you'd like, but at the same time, if you want, you can do that. So I cut out basically three things. I cut out 2C, I cut out A Botso, and I cut out doing 2B, 4B, and just did straight 2B. I find that way more consistent on Ryogi, just doing the combo like that, and slash or cutting it even earlier and doing 2A, 2C and not dropping like I did and actually getting the timing right, because there is still way more leniency now that you haven't scaled gravity as hard as you originally were doing the standard BNB that I mentioned. So that's how I treat Ryogi. But later down the line, you understand her having extra float is a benefit to you because it's now going to give you way more to do. Then we switch to Hisui. Hisui is a very unique case where she's great at expressing my hatred because of the fact that things that work on other characters for some reason don't work on her. That makes no sense. I don't fully understand her hurt box when she's in the air, but it is goofy. Like for her, I do that version, and that's fine. But there's also random things to keep in mind about Hisui. Like for some reason, she doesn't really have a head, or she doesn't really have limbs in certain cases. Like once I get to the next video, I talk about 5A replacing your two-way links because of the fact that it does over time add more damage. But for some reason, like as I am a 5A user, she for some reason doesn't want to get hit by it. Um, like it worked here, right? Fine. But if I do it more towards the traditional BNB, which actually does kind of work on her, right? Doesn't work there as a refresher, but she just drops out of the 5A, and the 5A hits lower than Kohaku's arm, but she just drops out of it. There's also other weird cases where she just refuses to work or cooperate. She's just unique, and I can't think of ways to force them to happen right now as much as like I'm used to them happening. But there's like cases where you will be going for like the second part of the Bato loop to finish it, and like she just takes out in the air. Like I can't think of literally how to force this right now, but like she'll randomly tech out in the air on something that no other character will tech out on, or etc. Like she just randomly doesn't get hit, and it's really goofy. And it's not that things don't work on her, it's just that timings are really unique on her, so it causes problems. So let's talk some general things that I'm talking at the end, but you have to keep in mind. So again, 5cc has a very unique hit stun where you can't micro hold. On top of the fact that you can only really do a 5cc up to 3 hits. There are 4 hits, but that fourth hit launches. So you're usually sweet spotting between 2 and 3 on 5cc. Another thing is the fact that since the hit stun is so low, usually doing 5cc into 2c does not combo. So, like, that is a major problem, which is why I said earlier, you're probably not using 2c in the same string that you're using 5c, because of the fact that if you're using it 5c late, that's one thing, but if you're using 5c first, you're probably skipping it entirely. Like, legit, like, as you saw, you're probably skipping it entirely. Another thing that I'd like to mention is there are some weird cases where if your hit stun is, like, if your hit count is too high, like, you got a plant hit, there's the way she decides to drop out of the combo, because that would work on other characters. But, some cases, once you have too many hits, it's better for you to just get your knockdown. Scaling is already going to be drastically high as it is, because that damage difference is very significant, and this is me still hitting with 2B start. or you probably just want to get your knockdown and just take the knockdown as is instead of trying to maximize your damage off of it because the damage is probably already scaled. Like there are some times where the hit count is so high, like Cactus, they get hit in the middle of Cactus, where quite literally what I'm doing for the combo is that. Or I just do charge JC straight in the 2C and just do a knockdown. I'll keep it that simple, just because of the fact that it gets to a point where sometimes it is more bothersome to properly optimize than it is to sit there and just get your knockdown and call it a day. And I recommend that for once you have too many plant hits or people get hit by a whole bunch of random stuff and the hit count is way too high. So, with those being my notes, I am now done with the first part of this series. Thank you for tuning in. It is still a long video. I think this is probably 35 minutes. Yeah, so farther than I expected it to be. I'm sorry. But it's the reality that there is a lot to talk about this character, on top of the fact that, as you see, I was dropping because my execution's mid, and I feel like I was also stumbling over my words because I am tired, and I'm not gonna lie, it feels like I have cotton mouth right now. Whatever. But thank you for tuning into the first part. Timestamps will be in the description. The Kohaku doc will be in the description. I will try to get the second part out soon, but I have to be real. I'm in the middle of a Vortex Gallery event season, busy with that. I normally do events, corporate and non, for concerts and stuff like that as a career, and I'm about to be booked for 3 weeks straight, busy with that. So we'll see once I get it out. Ideally, I get it out tomorrow night. We'll see what happens. So thank you for tuning in. Later.